You've likely met him before. He's magnetic, full of promise, and endlessly intriguing. He speaks of distant horizons, of groundbreaking ventures, of a destiny meant only for the rare and exceptional. He radiates confidence, ambition, and the glow of unspent potential. Yet, years pass, and nothing ever truly begins. His dreams remain untouched, his ambitions unfulfilled, and his life suspended in the endless prelude to something great. He is not lacking in talent or intelligence, far from it. But there is something elusive within him, something that resists definition. It's not just laziness nor fear alone. It's a deeper pattern embedded in his psyche, a quiet rebellion against the adult world. Carl Jung gave this pattern a name, puer aeternus, the eternal youth. It is not simply a phase or a quirk, but an archetype, a symbolic force rooted in the collective unconscious. The man-child is not just someone who refuses to grow. He is someone caught in the illusion that to grow is to die, to lose freedom, vitality, and the magic of possibility. He drifts through life like a beautiful echo of childhood, charming yet ultimately unanchored. And for those who love him, the experience is equal parts fascination and heartache. This is not a judgment nor a condemnation. It is a mirror, a lens through which we can examine not only the men who live this pattern, but also the parts of ourselves that still long to remain safe, innocent, and untouched by the world's weight. Because the truth is sobering. What begins as a dream can easily become a prison, and what seems like freedom can slowly become the most binding of chains. 1. The charm of the eternal boy. He doesn't walk, he drifts. He doesn't speak, he enchants. There's a sparkle in his eyes that makes you believe he was meant for more than this world could ever offer. His energy feels like springtime, unpredictable, alive, intoxicating. In his presence, you forget the weight of the ordinary. You begin to hope again, even if you don't know what for. This is the eternal boy in his purest form. People are drawn to him not for what he has achieved, but for what he might achieve. He lives in a state of infinite potential, forever promising a future that never arrives. He dreams vividly, speaks poetically, and touches others with a kind of emotional immediacy that feels rare in today's hardened world. But this appeal hides a crucial truth. He is not moving forward. He is circling the same inner terrain, mistaking motion for progress. To love him is to live on a tightrope between awe and exhaustion. In the beginning, you feel lucky. He sees the world through a different lens. He refuses to settle, to dull his soul with routine. But as time unfolds, the shine begins to fade. You realize his refusal to settle is also a refusal to commit. His distaste for routine becomes an inability to follow through. The one who once made you feel alive now leaves you feeling ungrounded, even abandoned. This pattern isn't accidental. The eternal boy avoids anchors for fear they might weigh him down. To commit to a path, a person, or a purpose means narrowing the field of dreams. It means taking responsibility for outcomes. And in his inner world, that's a kind of death, a loss of spontaneity, a betrayal of the myth of limitless freedom. So he floats, telling himself that he's choosing possibility, when in truth, he's avoiding reality. And reality has a gravity of its own. Eventually, life makes demands. Bills must be paid, time passes, relationships deepen or break. And here, the charm begins to crack. He misses appointments, forgets promises, shifts his goals with the wind. But each failure is wrapped in poetry. I'm just not ready. The world doesn't understand me. My time hasn't come yet. The excuses are romantic, but the consequences are real. Dreams decay, trust erodes. Still, people forgive him longer than they should. Why? Because we all carry a longing for the freedom he represents. We envy his resistance to convention, his bold refusal to grow old. But what looks like freedom is often fear in disguise, a fear of structure, of failure, of becoming ordinary. And beneath the boy's glow is a deep aversion to the very things that bring growth. He is not evil. He is not cruel. He is lost, enchanted by his own reflection in a mirror that only shows him what he might become, never what he actually is. The charm of the eternal boy is a gift, yes, but only when it leads somewhere. Only when he decides to root that light in the soil of real life. Otherwise, he becomes a ghost, felt but never held, admired but never known, present but never truly here. 2. The fear of maturity. At the root of his avoidance lies fear, not of monsters or failure alone, but of becoming real. Maturity demands sacrifice, discipline, and confrontation with the ordinary. The man-child dreads all three. To him, adulthood represents the death of wonder, a life of dull repetition, and the erosion of identity into roles and routines. So he resists. He fears being defined. To choose one thing means to lose 100 other versions of himself. This fear grows louder with time. He tells himself he's waiting for the right moment. But that moment never comes. He is not building a future. He is hiding in delay. There's a quiet panic behind his charming exterior. He cannot explain why he avoids responsibilities. He often feels misunderstood, pressured, even attacked by those who ask him to grow up. But deep down, he knows. He hasn't dared to step into his own life. He confuses freedom with indecision, passion with impulse, and individuality with isolation. Maturity feels like a betrayal of his dreamer self. But ironically, the longer he avoids growing, the more he becomes a shadow of his potential, trapped, not free. This fear often begins subtly. As a child, perhaps he was praised for being unique, for his ideas, for his talent, but not taught how to struggle, fail, or persist. He learned early that effort could invite disappointment, that mistakes were shameful, and that being special was safer than being responsible. So he created a shell of brilliance and lived within it, untouched by the friction of the world. He fears that growing up means giving up on magic. He associates maturity with compromise, monotony, even death of the soul. And because he sees so many around him dulling their light in order to meet the expectations of life, he clings even tighter to his childlike spontaneity. But what he misses is that true adulthood does not kill the dream, it refines it. It offers structure in which his brilliance might take root. His fear is not entirely irrational. Maturity does demand death, a symbolic one. The death of egoic fantasy. The death of the illusion that one can live without cost, without pain, without responsibility. And he isn't ready to die, so he keeps playing, hoping life will wait. He will often surround himself with others who also delay, who make drifting feel normal. Together, they create an echo chamber where never committing becomes a shared virtue. But eventually, one by one, others begin to move on, to marry, to commit, to build. And he is left feeling betrayed, as though the world abandoned him instead of the other way around. He doesn't realize that fear, not confronted, becomes fate. What he avoids controls him. Each time he runs from discomfort, he feeds the part of himself that believes he is incapable. And over time, the world begins to respond accordingly, not trusting him, not relying on him, not choosing him. This deepens the fear. It validates the story. The world doesn't get me, but it isn't rejection. It's consequence. The world cannot wait forever for someone to become real, and still there is hope. Fear only grows in darkness. When he begins to face it, not in one grand gesture, but in daily choices, it begins to shrink. He can start by keeping small promises, by showing up even when he doesn't feel ready, by allowing himself to fail and realizing the sky doesn't fall. He may mourn the version of himself that believed life could be lived in eternal summer. But what waits on the other side of that mourning is not numbness, it's purpose, real meaning. tangible joy. True maturity does not erase the inner child. It teaches him how to live in the world without being devoured by it. The boy does not need to die. He needs to grow. And growth, as painful as it is the only way forward. 3. The cycle of unfulfilled potential. He has ideas that leave others stunned. He speaks with conviction, his words brimming with clarity and depth. When he shares a dream, it's hard not to believe it's already half-born. Those who know him say he could be anything if only he tried. But that's just it. He rarely does, at least not all the way. This man is not devoid of energy. He's full of it, restless, raw, burning. But his fire lacks direction. He begins with fervor, with grand vision. The start is always explosive. He outlines the plan, inspires others, and even takes the first steps. But something shifts when the dream demands endurance. Where others dig in, he detours. Where obstacles arise, he reframes. Maybe this wasn't the right idea after all. Maybe something better is waiting. And just like that, the vision is abandoned. Not with regret, but with justification, wrapped in layers of self-protection. This is not laziness. It's fear disguised as perfectionism. He fears completion because it risks failure. As long as the project remains unfinished, its perfection is preserved. He clings to potential because it's safer than reality. And over time, his talent becomes a kind of curse, an echo of what could have been. He may blame others, the system, the timing, the lack of support. And sometimes he's not wrong. But what remains constant in every failed attempt is his unwillingness to confront discomfort head-on. He mistakes discomfort for misalignment and flees, thinking the next opportunity will feel effortless. The truth is, effort is not a sign of being on the wrong path. It's often a sign you've finally stepped onto it. This cycle of unfulfilled potential creates a silent grief. Those around him feel it first, watching him waste gifts that others would give anything to have. But eventually, he feels it too. He senses a gap inside, a disconnect between the man he appears to be and the one he knows he could become. This tension becomes unbearable. He may withdraw, or worse, he may overcompensate, becoming overly opinionated, defensive, even arrogant. But arrogance is often the armor of the insecure. Deep down, he knows he's not living in alignment with his essence. And yet, there's a quiet way out. If he can learn to stay, not just in relationships, but in work, in discomfort, in process, he can break the cycle. If he can commit to finishing, even when the result feels imperfect, he can begin to rebuild trust in himself. The world doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. It rewards those who return again and again to the craft, the commitment, the cause. Greatness isn't in the idea, it's in the execution. And in that execution, the eternal boy becomes something more. Not by losing his spark, but by forging it into something real. 4. The illusion of freedom. He speaks of freedom like a gospel. He rejects the conventional, resists the predictable, and recoils from anything resembling permanence. The man-child believes he was born to soar, not crawl through the trenches of ordinary life. And yet, for all his declarations of liberty, his life is full of limits. Because what he calls freedom is, in truth, avoidance. He refuses to settle, job, location, partner. He explains this as an act of integrity, a refuser, to betray his authentic self. But each avoidance is another missed opportunity to engage, to grow, to shape something lasting. His rebellion becomes repetition. He's not creating something new. He's replaying the same script over and over. True freedom isn't absence of responsibility. It's the ability to choose responsibility. He claims that commitment would kill his creativity. But creativity thrives in limits. Discipline is the container that gives art its form. Commitment is no, a cage. It's a canvas. And until he learns that, his gifts will remain scattered, his life unfocused. He runs from the ordinary, but ordinary is where meaning is forged. He wants love without sacrifice, purpose without effort, success without struggle. But the most meaningful aspects of life are slow, layered, and require investment over time. This illusion of freedom begins to cost him. His relationships become short-lived, his work fragmented, his confidence brittle. He feels both superior to others and secretly envious of them, especially those who build quietly, who choose stability not out of fear but clarity. Eventually, freedom becomes its own prison. He is no longer choosing, he is reacting. Reacting to fear, to pressure, to time, and the longer he floats, the further he drifts from the shore of his own potential. To reclaim true freedom, he must stop fleeing. He must learn the power of saying yes, and staying with that yes, even when it hurts. Especially then. Because it is through limits, not in spite of them, that a man becomes whole. 5. The shadow of the man-child. At first, he is irresistible, but over time a pattern reveals itself, a quiet erosion of structure, stability, and trust. He doesn't intend to break promises. He simply forgets, or shifts direction, or loses interest. But when someone questions him, he deflects. "You're being controlling. You don't understand me." He avoids confrontation, not with anger, but with absence. He disappears emotionally, sometimes physically, and those around him are left holding the weight of what he could not carry. This is the shadow of the eternal boy, not cruel but careless, not malicious but unaware. It is not that he doesn't love. He does. But his love is scattered, inconsistent, and ultimately unreliable. His shadow also lives in rationalization. Every failure has a story, every retreat a justification, and he speaks of energy, of alignment, of the universe's timing. But underneath the spiritual language is simple fear. Fear of accountability, of being seen, of being ordinary. The shadow deepens when others try to help. He may charm his way out of critique, or worse, he may weaponize vulnerability, turning his wounds into shields. "You're being unfair. You expect too much from me." But the truth is, growth demands discomfort, and he isn't ready. This creates a dynamic where others feel like caretakers, not partners, where love becomes labor and eventually resentment builds. Not because people stop caring, but because caring alone is not enough when one person refuses to show up. To face the shadow is to name it, to see that freedom without reliability is not love, it's sabotage. And unless he chooses to step into his own shadow, it will continue to unravel everything good in his life. His behavior erodes intimacy in subtle ways. He makes promises in passion but abandons them in silence. He avoids tough conversations, preferring to disappear than to engage in emotional repair. And when confronted with the pain he causes, he often becomes the victim in the narrative. This reversal is a powerful mechanism. He accuses those who expect consistency of being too rigid. He labels boundaries as restrictions, and in doing so, he avoids the very tension that could make him whole. His relationships become performative, a stage for affection without accountability. But the shadow doesn't stop at relationships. It seeps into his work, his sense of self, his worldview. He begins to believe that nothing is worth staying for, that permanence is a lie, that depth always leads to disappointment. So he stays light, unattached, elusive, yet inside something breaks. He may not admit it, but a deep loneliness takes root. A voice within whispers, "You are always leaving, and no one knows who you really are." And in his quietest moments, he hears that truth like an echo in an empty room. Integration is possible, but it begins with a decision to stop protecting his peace and start transforming it, to stop avoiding the wound and begin healing it. The boy must descend into the very shadow he fears, and emerge as a man capable of standing in both light and darkness. 6. The devouring mother archetype. He was not born a man-child. The pattern was learned, often in quiet moments of dependency that were never broken. Somewhere in his early life, he was protected instead of prepared, indulged instead of challenged. The symbolic mother, whether his actual mother, a romantic partner, or a feminine presence, acts as both sanctuary and trap. She means well. She wants him safe, comfortable, whole. But in sheltering him from pain, she also shields him from life. He learns that he doesn't need to try, that someone will always pick up the pieces. And later, when faced with real-world consequences, he unconsciously seeks the same dynamic, not a partner but a caretaker, not an equal but a replacement for the mother he never psychologically separated from. This leads to relational imbalance. He grows dependent even if he claims independence. He seeks warmth but avoids depth. And when the woman in his life asks for accountability, he feels betrayed. He doesn't want to grow. He wants to be held. The maternal figure, meanwhile, becomes drained. What began as love becomes exhaustion. She may stay too long, hoping he will change. But without separation, growth cannot begin. The umbilical cord must be cut, not in cruelty, but in truth. This rupture is painful. It feels like abandonment, but it is liberation for both. The psychological relationship with the archetypal mother is deeply embedded in the unconscious. Thus, in Jungian terms, the mother is not just a person, it is a pattern, a symbol of protection and comfort. When this archetype dominates a man's psyche, he remains stuck in a passive position, always waiting to be saved. He may interpret any expectation as rejection, any challenge as hostility, because in his world, love means protection, not provocation. He does not understand that real love also demands confrontation, that to be fully seen, one must first be fully responsible. His dynamic can even be spiritualized. He might refer to the feminine as sacred, idealize women to the point of abstraction, and claim that he is too sensitive, too wounded to face the world. But this romanticization is a veil, a way of avoiding the real, grounded, often unglamorous work of becoming an adult. And so the cycle persists. He finds women who want to heal him, who take on the burden of his growth. And in doing so, they become trapped as well. They confuse nurturing with rescuing. They confuse patience with denial. True healing requires rupture, a moment where the boy is left to stand alone, to make decisions without being rescued, to feel fear and not retreat. The man-child cannot become a man until he walks away from the symbolic mother, not with hatred, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the care that brought him this far, and clarity that it cannot take him further. The path forward is not rebellion. It is separation with love. It is growing up, no, it's to reject the mother, but to finally become someone she no longer needs to protect. 7. The path to maturity. Growth begins in crisis. Not external, but internal, the quiet collapse of the fantasy. The realization that time is passing and potential unfulfilled becomes burden. That all the things he postponed are now demanding to be faced. The path is narrow. It requires mourning for the dreams that never took flight, the illusions that shielded him, the version of himself that never had to try. But beyond this grief is birth, not of someone new, but of someone fin, ally real. He must begin with action, small, unglamorous steps, keeping his word, showing up even when he doesn't feel like it, letting someone love him while he learns how to be reliable. These are not heroic acts, but they are revolutionary. The inner boy doesn't need to be silenced. He must be mentored by the adult self who chooses structure, service, and stability. When the dreamer and the doer meet, life becomes art. Not fantasy, but a living sculpture carved by effort. And that in that life something beautiful happens. The man who once fled from responsibility now finds meaning in it. He no longer avoids the world, he shapes it. He no longer waits to be chosen, he chooses. And in doing so, he finally grows, not out of fear, but into purpose. Maturity is not a surrender of the soul, it is its embodiment. It means grounding the dreamer, guiding the artist, protecting the inner child not by sheltering him, but by leading him. The mature man does not discard his youthful self. He integrates him. He learns to live in rhythm with the seasons, to build with patience, to love without control, to fail without collapsing, to speak less and act more. He begins to live not for applause, but for alignment, not for escape, but for engagement. The path is hard, but it's the only one that leads to fulfillment. Every act of courage, every moment of presence, every promise kept slowly reshapes the psyche, and what emerges is not perfection, but wholeness. A man no longer defined by what he might become, but by what he chooses to become every single day. This is the real journey, not from child to adult, but from avoidance to embodiment. And in this journey, there is no final arrival, only deeper honesty, richer love, and a quiet strength that does not need to prove itself. There comes a time when even the most persistent illusions begin to fracture, when the safety of eternal preparation gives way to the quiet ache of time slipping by, when relationships wear thin, when creativity turns stale, and when life, once so full of vibrant options, begins to feel like a narrowing hallway. For the eternal boy, this is the moment of reckoning, the moment when he must decide whether to keep floating through fantasy or to descend into the ground of real existence. His transformation is not romantic. It does not happen overnight. It is painful, slow, and often marked by loss. The loss of comfort, of idealized self-images, of the fantasy that one can have everything without ever choosing something. But this pain is sacred. It is the birth pain of a deeper self, the initiation into authentic manhood. True growth does not ask you to kill the boy within, but to invite him into maturity, to let his light and creativity serve a grounded, structured, purposeful life. The man-child must come to see that responsibility is not the enemy of freedom. It is its foundation. That commitment is not the death of possibility, but the soil where real achievement takes root. Carl Jung once wrote that what you resist not only persists, but grows stronger. The more a man avoids the call to grow, the more deeply he falls under the spell of his own shadow. But if he dares to confront it, if he dares to look inward and name the fear, then the spell can be broken, then the boy can evolve, then the man can begin. This is not the end of his story, it is the first true beginning.